Hi, Carol.
Hey, we are live. You're watching Fantastic Fiction at KGB. I'm Matthew Kressel. I host a series with Ellen Datlow. Tonight's guests are Nalo Hopkinson and Bruce McAllister. We're going to start in about 15 minutes. Right now, we're just going to hang out. So stick around, pull up a chair, pull up a drink, and thanks for joining us. So,
homemade ginger beer.
What are you drinking there?
Is that Jamaican ginger beer? Is that ginger beer?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
okay. It's strong. Is it homemade?
Yeah.
Oh, because
don't bring it to a Zoom meeting unless you can share it with everybody.
Right.
Well, we're in the business of imagining such things.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
The virtual ginger beer.
The great gingerbread beer novel.
Yes.
I have syrup for ginger beer.
Yes.
You know, that I could make after I'm drinking my seltzer with, I forget, orange essence, or whatever the hell it is.
I started making it with white wine yeast, which is a really happy yeast. It doesn't even stop fermenting when you put it in the fridge. That's supposed to stop the fermentation.
Oh.
Wow.
It's still going.
Oh, so is it yours? It's liquor. Yours?
No, not at all. I mean, it'll have a little bit because yeast produces a tiny amount of alcohol, but it's not alcoholic.
So how exactly do you make it?
The simple way is distilled water, ginger, yeast, and sugar in the blender. Pour it into the distilled water and let it steep for 2 or 3 days or until the bottle looks like it's going to explode. Then you strain it, bottle it if you're going to do that, and let it sit another couple days. But here in the desert, it's so warm that I only need to do it once. I don't need to do the double fermentation. And then it gets fizzy. At that point, I stick it in bottles and stick it in the fridge. It's really simple.
So what gives it that orange color?
It's the ginger. There's a lot of ginger produces a lot of starch, which I didn't know till I started doing this at home, and the starch gets stirred up from the bottom.
It looks like a hazy IPA. I drink a lot of those.
Yes,
and they have exactly the same color.
So
I was like, that looks like a really
hazy
nice
IPA. Perfect.
And then I was like, oh no, it's just orange juice. But no,
yeah. I tell my undergrads, really, no beer and ginger beer.
Right. It's just OJ. I mean, very healthy.
Probably great for your immune system, though.
Yeah.
I love ginger.
Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
Didn't used to as a kid.
Sour ale.
Ah.
Whoa.
Like ale too.
Morbid curiosity.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's good. It's tart.
So is this ginger beer. It didn't start out that way, but the little yeast have eaten all the sugar.
I've never made my own beer. I have a friend who does that, Mike DeLuca. He's going to be reading for us in a few months, and his beer is good. This beer is good. I'm in an apartment in New York City, so I don't think. I mean, we probably could get a small keg in here, but my wife's shaking her head no.
My mom, when they lived in Connecticut, used to make wine, and she would put it under the sink to, do its thing. And I remember two incidents. My dad was still a drinking man at that time, and he came home from university, and he wasn't done yet. So he opened the new wine. Had such a headache the next day. And then there was the day that the orange wine exploded under the sink.
Nothing like homemade things.
Yes. Yeah, for surprising you.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. So what are you guys going to be reading from tonight?
I'm going to read 2 very, very short stories, both of them from Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in the New Millennium. Mm-hmm. One science fiction and one fantasy. And the fantasy short is actually one of the 2 prologues to my last novel, that little fix up or whatever it's called, series of stories connected, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And that should probably take me 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Very slowly.
Great.
Yes.
Now I was going to have to.
Oh no.
You're going to have to perform many things. You're going to have to do the ginger beer dance, as well as the dramatic reading from the graphic novel, as well.
Oh
And
God.
the recipe of the ginger beer.
Yes. Yeah, I'm reading from an anthology that just came out, and nowadays trying to describe my stories as either science fiction or fantasy is a bit of a challenge. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What anthology?
Excuse me. It's called Planet City, and it's part of a multimedia project by a speculative architect. And he's doing it for a triennial. There's a film that goes along with it. And I'm going to, part of how I'm using up my 20 minutes is to talk some background about the anthology. So
I'm very
I'll wait
curious.
to do that then.
What's a speculative architect?
It's not so much about building buildings as looking at the future built environments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's yeah.
By the way, you can see people commenting if you have the comment.
Oh, I don't. Let's see. Oh, comments.
Rick,
Oh, there we are.
Rick always calls it a mosaic novel. Yeah, Rick Bose is talking about. Yeah. Well, because when you said like a speculative architect, it just, I don't know, I had all these visions in my head of like fantastic cities and, you know, but
Linda.
yeah, makes sense. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to hang out and chat for a little while before we get started, just to let people filter into the room. So Ellen and I are looking at right now October, going back to the bar. So
All right. Good.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's what we're planning.
Working on it. Yeah.
You know, in person. So I have to figure out what we're going to do about the videos. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it live because it'll be too chaotic with the breaks that we have. I might just film it and then edit it and put like my camera on the side on a little tripod and record it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pain in the neck, but okay. I mean, then you would put it on the site or something. I mean, you wouldn't edit
Yeah,
it.
like I could still upload it to YouTube, but then it would just be a little bit less, you know, live.
Managed. Yeah.
Yeah.
More speculative.
More
Yes.
yes, it's speculative.
Yes, you're supposed to come
It
here.
would be unlive.
Yeah.
We want Linda. We want
We
Linda.
want to commute from Arizona. I know. We're still. I mean, we still want to make it accessible for people. Obviously, not in New York. I mean, we always have the podcast, and we always will.
Yeah.
But now that we're doing video, I want to do more video as well. So
Yeah. I mean, what we've been trying. I mean, once we figured out it was going to be closed down for a while, we decided we should try to get people who can't usually make it to New York. You know. So, I mean, like really far away, you know, it's like, so we got Usman, Pakistan, and we got Lauren Bukis from South Africa.
got Australia,
That's very, very cool.
We got Australia, yeah, and
UK.
England, UK. Yeah, so I mean, it's a really great opportunity to do that. Although it's bad timing for some people. I think for Usman it was like, what, 3 a.m. or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Here's a very important from Gay Terry. Very important.
Can we still wear our PJs?
Yeah.
Yes,
Always
yeah, you
wear
can.
the PJs.
To the
When it comes
bar.
New York City, you can always wear PJs.
Yeah.
Wear whatever you want. Yeah. Hi, Matt S. I'm not sure who you are, but okay.
It looks like people want the video to continue.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah.
We can do
So
it.
I want to like film the bar because I think, you know, the issue I think is doing it live is that we take, instead of taking a 5-minute break, we take a 15-minute break And then,
Right.
I'm not going to leave the camera running for that.
No.
People are getting drinks at the bar. There'll be a lot of noise.
Right.
So I, like I said, if I would just record the readings
Hi, Carmen.
and then splice it into a little video, it might work.
That could work, I guess. Yeah.
We'll
But-
see.
Well, I mean, couldn't you just shut it off in between breaks and then?
Yeah,
say,
I don't know if you can do that with a live stream, like pause it.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, because then there'd just be a gap in it, right?
Well, if you edit it, splice it together afterwards. I don't know. Part 1, part 2.
But then it wouldn't be live if I'm editing it afterwards.
No. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, no,
brave
you
new
edit it after the fact when it's finished. I mean, you record the first half, shut it off, and then just start recording the second half live.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, but I wouldn't release the video until like
Right.
a day or two later.
But what I'm saying that you could still video it live so people could do a live.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry. Yeah. Sophie's going. You'll see Sophie go by, maybe.
Yeah.
Where is Sophie? Is she going? Where are you?
What is this thing?
Behind my rocking chair, which is not a good place.
No.
Look, it's stepped on. There she goes. Little one.
Yes, Amy. Yes, I could ask Terrence about that. I'm sure he has a lot of suggestions.
Yeah, that's good. Mm.
Well, this is happening more and more, that people who can't,
Well, right. Who can't?
COVID couldn't make it physically to the meetings, whatever the meetings are. Now they're Zooming, and now they want to continue, right, to be doing it remotely.
Yes.
So-
And we want them to. We definitely want them there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people who are from other places, would like to come by and see it live.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, and I noticed with cons, a lot of people who don't attend cons because they've got social anxiety issues
Mhm.
can now go to cons this way,
Exactly.
sort of choose their environments and have more control over it. And it's been so cool to see people I wouldn't normally see at a con.
That's right.
I wonder if there'll be
We have
some.
to continue both worlds.
I was going to say, if there's some kind of hybrid way, maybe you could still have in person, but you could say, look, this panel is going to be in person and Zoom. We're going to have it up on the.
I think it's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
Both are going to have to. You're right. Not a hybrid.
Yeah.
Well, the schools are having to figure it out because when we go back live,
Yeah, that's right.
it's going to be combined. I have no idea how you manage a classroom like that, but
Nope.
Yeah. Well, my wife does it. What they do is they basically she goes into work half the day and comes home for half the day for the remote stuff because the signal in the school is just not good enough to do.
Well, someone told me, I don't remember who, that they had to do it partly in person. And I think it was Jim Blaylock saying, yes, they have classes in person and at the same time you're Zooming or whatever, which seems horrible. If you have a few students and you have to interact with all of them, with the ones on video and the ones in person at the same time, sounds really horrible.
It's
I think if I had a feed that everybody could see, people in the classroom, me, people outside the classroom, then I could manage it because that's kind of like
but some of the tech isn't quite there yet. I mean, this is the future isn't here yet.
Well, who would have known that doing this for a year of Zooming and stuff? I mean,
yeah, but sometimes it's a matter of. I know a lot of writers who, like me, kind of evaluate manuscripts forwards and backwards in a kind of circular way, and that's I don't know, 8-foot computer screen. I mean, voice scrolling something from the movie Minority Report. I don't know what it would take, but it's not here yet, or at least we can't afford it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying as opposed to what, laying it out on a table? Is that what you mean?
You mean editing?
No, what did you mean? Like they needed a screen wide to look at the manuscript? I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, scrolling.
Yeah.
Right, on a screen. A lot of people don't do that. That's not what they do. They still. I know lots of, and granted, it can sound like old farts, but it's people who they would rather have a printout and be able to
Oh,
read
yeah.
forwards and backwards. It's extrapolative, associative reading, part of evaluation. IBM called it expertise wetware. It's how we do things, and it's just hard to do. And I think Apple's not the future of desktops.
Right.
Isn't there. So I know that, and I know with my coaching and consulting clients, I'll say I need I'm going to print it out. Why do you have to print it out? Why can't you read it on the screen? And can't do it.
You read I do sometimes read diagonally down from left to right.
They're
scanning. Yeah.
And as we get older and wiser, that kind of jumping page to page through it, hitting the end, going back to the beginning, and it's a professional read. You kind of don't want to admit it to your clients, right? That's how you read, but it works. It's why you can do it well.
Well, see, that's why I have PDF files when I'm reading anything, because I can't go back. You can't go back in a PDF. It's really hard to go back and forth.
That's what I mean. This is
unless
not here yet.
There are some PDF, I guess, files that can, but most people don't have them yet.
Yeah.
You can go back and forth from the table of contents to the where you are, but it's still, you can't page back. You have to know exactly where you're going, which is not great for.
Well, I think that might just be the software you're using, but yeah, I mean, definitely, I feel because I obviously was born before e-readers were a thing, and I find that I retain a lot more when I'm reading paper than I do on the e-reader.
Yes. And what they say is that some of that's the flicker of the screen. You know how it can send some people into epilepsy?
Oh, yeah.
First of all, that's why you can't proofread on a screen. It's really difficult for a lot of people.
Terrible for your eyes because, some of the new monitors are better with this, but the literally tiny, subtle flickering causes your eyes to refocus.
That's right.
I know that my eyes start burning if I'm online reading a lot.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of editing a novella online and finding it easier than I thought. And I decided to use track change. I'm still the old-fashioned person who wants to copy and paste into my email. And that, Matt. And finally, with the novella, it's like, fuck this. And after page 17, I said, Matt, not you, Matt, the other Matt. I'm sorry, I'm editing. I said, would you mind if we just do the track changes? I can't do this. I can't do it with 90 pages. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I started just doing it online, and it's actually easier, but it's not great on my eyes. After a while, my eyes start burning.
Amelie's my wife, and she's retired, but retired into her third active life, right? In other words, now we've got another 30 years, and she's in the field of medical Qigong and medical Tai Chi. But she also is a former dancer. And so she's taking a flamenco class, and the flamenco teacher is trying to do people who are present as well as Zoomers. It's really difficult. See, and that's what isn't that what you're talking about?
Teaching dancing on Zoom.
People doing yoga
on Zoom if you have to teach it on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
It's murder. It's been the killer of dance departments through.
Yes. There is a company called Steezy. I'm not sure how the technology works, but you can download their workshops and switch between seeing the front of the choreographer and the back, which is really helpful for those of us who turn around and get dizzy.
Again, it's like mechanical. It's like it's not quite here. And then about the time that we may not need it as much, there'll be less pressure. In other words, we won't get the tang that we thought the military and NASA would come up with.
Yeah. We probably should start. Maybe
we probably should start
this again after, or when we have to.
Okay, it's about 12 after. So if you're just joining us, you're watching Fantastic Fiction at KGB. I'm Matthew Kressel. I co-host a series with Ellen Datlow. It's a speculative fiction reading series that is held on the third Wednesday of every month. This is our 14th month doing it on YouTube on a live stream as opposed to in person for obvious reasons. If you're watching this, 100 years from now, it was a pandemic and we all had the lockdown. But yeah, so it's actually.
Little days, no.
Did we talk about? I can't remember if we did this before or after we went live, but we were just talking about all the people we had from all over the globe, and we basically got guests who couldn't normally attend come to New York City. So we had Usman Malik from Pakistan, we had Lauren Bukes from South Africa, Karen Warren from Australia,
from England.
Yeah, from the UK, and so we've been having people from all over. Right now, it's still a little bit of a question mark, but we're hoping to be back in the bar in October. That's the date we chose.
Hang on that.
Seems right now doable, but we'll see. We're keeping an eye on things. But yeah, so the fantastic fiction reading series it's been going on since the late 90s. It was started by Alice Turner, Terry Bisson, and it's been several different hosts over the years, including Gavin Grant. And Ellen and I have been doing it together for about 12 years or so. Ellen has been doing it a little bit longer than I have. The bar itself is always free to get in. There's never a cover charge, but all we ask is that you buy a drink, hard or soft. So obviously we're not in the bar. The bar itself, because of the shutdown, has been closed. Although actually, I think they might be open at limited capacity now. But we want to support the bar and keep them going. Actually, no, wait, this one. So there's the link there. So if you can afford the cost of a drink, it'd be great if you can donate to the KGB Bar to keep it going. It's like really a great bar in the East Village of Manhattan. They've been hosting us forever, for 20 something years. So, and then the series itself, fantastic fiction. We give the guests a stipend. We, when we were meeting in person, we would take them out to dinner. We tip the bartenders. We still give money to the bar. And it also costs us a little bit of money to, pay for the streaming services. So if you can afford to support us, that would be fantastic. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And some people, I'm not going to mention them, but some people who are watching tonight have been donating to us regularly, and really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much. You know who you are. And if you do plan to donate, again, thank you very much. So yeah. What's that?
But don't feel you have to.
Don't feel you have to. No, totally. If you just want to watch, totally fine with us. So yeah, we're excited about tonight's guests, Nalo Hopkinson and Bruce McAllister. And I love to just use this while I can. Here's their book covers. They have more books than these, but we can only fit one cover each at the moment. But yeah, so I'm gonna, if you look at the YouTube link, the YouTube info down below, you'll see links to buy their books and their bios. But yeah, so our first reader is going to be Bruce McAllister. Oh wait, one more thing. Sorry, we're going to do a Q&A after the reading. So Bruce is going to read, Nalo's going to read, and then we're going to do a Q&A with both authors. So if you have questions, I know a lot of you watching now have seen this before, but you can type your questions in the Google Live chat, and then you can ask them anything. So we're going to do that at the end of the readings. Bruce McAllister has been writing science fiction, fantasy, and horror for some decades. He began as an SF writer, but these days writes more fantasy of the uncanny kind. His most recent novel is a little thing called The Village Sang to the Sea, a Memoir of Magic. His Hugo-nominee short story Kin launched the new podcast, Levar Burton Reads. Here's Bruce McAllister.
Thank you. And by the way, thanks for all the comments. They're really wonderful. And thank you, Amy, for the Adobe suggestion. What I'd like to do is read two very short stories, both of them from Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and both of them from the new millennium. And first one is called Breath. I went out to the islands to fish that day. It was a blustery autumn one, but beautiful. The islands postcard perfect, and a break from this digital engineered world we live in. Even if I didn't catch anything, it would be a pleasant afternoon. It was a half-day charter boat, and those aboard to fish, just a handful of us, were strangers to one another, but friendly enough. 2 young couples from Japan who'd never fished before, an awkward father with his son for the weekend, 2 old fishermen who stayed by themselves and complained, as old fishermen often do, and a bright-eyed teenager, a crew member, who hung out with us and rigged our lines if we needed him to. Everyone wanted to catch something. We were told we could have the ship's crew clean and fillet what we caught, or we could take it home to do with it whatever we wanted. One of the old fishermen and the awkward father were the first to catch the mer children, but I couldn't see the action well. I was attending to my line and didn't want to lose my place at the gunwale by going over to look. The mer children screamed, that I could hear. They did it the instant they hit the air. That and the decompression as they were reeled in was what bothered them, not the hooks, or not as much. They thrashed just like fish with their twin tails on the wet deck. I could hear that too. I caught glimpses of an eye that had popped from being reeled up too quickly and a cheek torn by a hook. Blood. The old fisherman and the father were doing what fishermen do. I caught the next mer child myself. It didn't fight much, but reeling it in slowly so as not to damage it from the reef 450 feet down took a long time. I could see, looking their way, that the old fisherman knew what I was trying to do and felt contempt. I was trying to avoid hurting the thing. I was trying to keep it from swallowing the hook. They knew. The first thing I saw was the flash of its tails, then its head, like a human infant's, born from the sea and taking its first breath, pulled into the world of air. It was heavy, and I knew it might break the line once I had it free of the water. But when the teenager, the crew member, ran up with a gaff, I said, no. He looked confused but kept smiling. You're going to lose it. It's a 30-pounder. I know. You don't care if you lose it? Yes, I do. Do you have a net? Sure. Could you get it? He'd lost his smile, but he came back with a long pole net. You're going to have to reel it up the first 5 feet, he said. The boat was riding high. I can't reach that far. I understand, I said. I reeled carefully. I could see Tara's face back at the house. Bring one home, Dave. I'd nodded, a promise without saying it, and she turned so I couldn't see her crying. I didn't lose it. It mewled and gasped, trying to breathe, getting better at it, and when the teenager had lifted it up in the net, I pulled it out by its arms even before it was over the deck. The hook and the bait, a piece of squid, had kicked free, leaving its bottom lip torn and bleeding, though not too badly. Its hands had tried to get the hook free and were bleeding a little too. Don't take it out yet, the teenager said. It'll thrash, you'll lose it. When he saw how I was holding the thing cradled in my arm, he took a step back. His eyes widened. He realized why I was there. Probably the first person he'd ever met with my reason for catching one, or one who'd admit to it. I was holding it like an infant. The boy with the awkward father, the boy who'd asked me for help rigging his line when his father was stumbling over his own pole, was suddenly at my side, trying to touch the tails of the mer child and saying, "You going to eat him? We're going to eat ours. There are too many of them," my dad says. "You've got to thin them out or they'll kill all the endangered fish." That's what they say, isn't it? I answered. I'd heard it all before. Everyone had. Someone had introduced the merkind to the California coast, an accidental release of 200 pods of them by a bioengineered pet company, Dream Pet or Mo Pet or Design Me. I couldn't remember, and the Channel Islands had become their feeding and breeding grounds, displacing the remaining seals and eating the smaller, threatened fish species the seals had never bothered with. Some weren't sure it had been an accident, more like a dumping. The merkind, the Little Mermaid, and Little Merlad, lines of Dream Pet, the pretty swimmers from Design Me, all those sentient products were hard to take care of and hadn't sold well. And there were laws and a very expensive process covering the disposal of pets engineered from simian and cetacean genetic stock, which is what the merkind were. Monkeys and porpoises with a gill system thrown in. You could see it in their faces and hands and their hips and tails, the intelligence in their eyes. The awkward father was at my side too. He pulled his son back the first time I'd seen him touch the boy. The father also knew what I was doing. It's going to cost you a hell of a lot of money, he said sternly. Not really, I answered. You just have to know what you're doing. I was speaking on Tara's behalf as well as my own. She'd done all the research. She was an incredible researcher. We had enough money. We were professionals, both of us in well-paying AR fields, and we'd saved for 5 years. It may not work, the father was saying. There's not enough literature. They're pets, and they were dumped because of accelerated tumor growth or some other mortality stat, something. You want one at your house covered with tumors like a lab rat? He was angry, anger wearing a veil of caring. I wasn't sure why, except that when we're not sure what we're feeling, that can upset us, and we get angry. One of the old fishermen, the one now holding a burlap bag with the thing he'd caught, already filleted by a crew member, had the same anger in his eyes. I'm a doctor, the father added, an anesthesiologist. He wanted me to at least euthanize it at a vet's. At least that, he was telling me. As I walked to the parking structure, I looked at the thing writhing in my arms, the raspy skin slick with mucus from its mouth and nose, its tails and its back the blue of Caribbean waters, its belly white as milk, and its moon face still full of panic as its mouth opened and closed, and its gills fluttered, trying to understand what was happening to it. In the car, I put it in the portable aerated aquarium we bought for it, securing the contraption as well as I could in the back seat. I was afraid it might die on the 30-minute drive home, but it didn't. Its breathing had calmed, the gills moving rhythmically now, its mouth and nose and lungs not having to do the work. It was breathing water again. At the house, Tara was waiting for me at the curb. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. I hadn't seen her smile like that in years, and wasn't that what this was about? The years of trying, of the best and most expensive fertility treatments, of failed surrogacies and endless waits on adoption lists, and still nothing. The special room we'd had built by our bedroom had cost money, sure, but it had kept us busy and hopeful and close for nearly 2 years. There had been others doing the same, couples in other cities in a chat room to share experiences, how to prepare its food, how to vary its diet without risk, how often to hold it each day, how to hold it, what was love to a simian or a cetacean, a body that felt like a parent's, faces, touch, sounds. How was it different from human love? How was it the same? Tara checked the big aquarium's temperature, salinity, and other values and nodded. And standing on the stepladder, I let the child slip from my arms into the water. It sank for a moment, and then, as its eyes calmed again and its mouth closed, the webbed hands began to paw at the water. The two beautiful tails began to move too, taking it away from us and then turning it around, back toward us as it stared, a child's face bleeding just a little at the two faces watching it from the other side of the glass. Behind me, Tara said something, the name we'd decided on perhaps, but it was lost in a sudden happy splashing. That's that. Just a second. Are people there?
Yeah, we're here. We were muted. Everybody's
Okay.
clapping. Everybody's clapping.
Okay. No, I wasn't waiting for clapping. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we're here. We're here.
I
We
hadn't
have
done
you
so.
soloed, so everyone's muted, so you don't hear us coughing and shuffling around. But yes,
That's
we're here.
okay. I'll be here through Thursday. All
Okay,
right.
good.
Okay. This is the this is called The Seventh Daughter. Again, it appeared in Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and it's one of the prologues to the book that Matt mentioned, The Village Sang to the Sea, a Memoir of Magic. The American boy lived with his parents in a small villa, high on a hillside above a cove where young people danced at night, their voices rising through the olive trees to him as he fell asleep. Sometimes he did not know which was the real story. The Lavurian sea below him in the night where a poet had drowned long ago, the laughter and shouting below him that drowned out the whispers of that sea and the mutterings of that poet. The boyish face he saw in the mirror when he dared to look, the things he made of clay and words that only he knew about. It didn't matter. It was real, and yet it was not. But the question was always there as he fell asleep and woke. In the top drawers of his bedroom dresser, with every color of modeling clay, he had made a world and knew its story. The 7 Daughters of Satan, he called it. He built carefully the valley, forest, and 7 villages where the daughters of Satan, who abandoned them, had grown up. The village men were scared of the beautiful daughters because the men knew who they were. The daughters showed no dark gifts, no witches' skills or demonic tendencies, but the men of the villages felt it, the waiting for him. The entire valley and the mountains that surrounded it waited. If you held your breath and stayed entirely still, you could even hear it, the ticking of God's great clock. The hour didn't matter. What mattered was that the ticking never stopped. The men heard it as they stared, hearts breaking, at 7 daughters and did not step toward them. The daughters did not understand. They could not hear the ticking. They did not know how the men wanted them. The daughters kept more and more to themselves, and the men said less and less. A child might run up to one of them, say something, hand something to her, take something away, even play with her, but the adults never did. The daughters grew sullen, their white faces and their red lips once like 7 sleeping beauties, but now like fading ghosts. He will return, the villagers whispered to themselves. Inside their thatched house where the daughters had grown up and where they slept side by side on mats on a clay floor, they had a deaf nanny to watch over them. The nanny could not hear the ticking and was growing blinder as well. Each daughter had a dresser built years ago when the daughters were little, by men from the villages. In each daughter's dresser, there were 7 drawers, and in the top drawer, made of clay and fashioned by the nanny's son, who lived with them but slept in a separate room, was a replica of the village where the daughter was born. The villagers knew that late at night, little people of clay, homunculi, were brought to life by supernatural power and moved through the clay village in each drawer to entertain the lonely daughter there. One day the boy, who was not from this valley but knew its story, found the smallest and prettiest of the daughters and stood before her, big and gangly in his dark suit, his skin on fire from self-consciousness. She was, he saw, scared too. "Are you my father?" she asked. "No," he answered, "I am a boy." She nodded, smiled a little, and let him dance her across the cobbles of the village square to music that was like the humming of God. Soon every daughter was dancing, and the clock stopped its ticking. When strains of 1950s songs like Diana and Heavenly Shades of Night and all the others reached the boy from that outdoor dance floor in the cove below his bedroom window, he lay in bed thinking of the boys and girls a few years older than he and flirting in another language, dancing. He would not get up. He would not turn on a light. He would listen to the songs until he fell asleep. As he slept, he dreamed long, adventurous dreams of strange places, heroes and creatures of legends, but also shorter dreams about hills covered with vipers and funerals of his relatives and a little boat in a storm, sinking. It was these shorter dreams that came true. Why, he didn't know. It made no sense, but what it did in life. The longer dreams became stories he wrote in longhand and kept secret in the drawer right below the 7 daughters. The ones that came true, he never wrote down. It frightened him too. When he woke from his dreams, he went to school with his friends from the village or went down to the wharf by himself to find seashells among the fish in the nets, or walked along the dirt road leading from his house past the walls with their brave green lizards to the Hotel Byron. One day his parents said it. "That hotel is too new. It couldn't be where they lived." "Who?" the boy asked. "Mary Shelley and her husband Percy," they answered. "The woman who wrote that book, the one about the monster, Frankenstein." Not long after, he would learn from someone that Percy, her husband, the poet, had drowned one stormy night in his little boat as he made his way from Viareggio up the coast back to this very village. When the boy was back in his own country and the dreams, the ones that came true, had stopped, and he no longer wrote stories or made things of clay to put in drawers, he learned that that woman, Mary, had dreamed her dream, the one that had become her sad and terrible book, in that fishing village too. Often years later, when he was grown and had a wife and children, he would try to remember what had happened to the drawer and its mountains, valley, villages, and people of clay. The 7 daughters of Satan, he had called it. This he could remember, but he could not remember what had happened to that clay. Did it matter? Were people, your wife, your children, what mattered? Then one night, as he lay beside his wife, she put her arm over him and whispered in the dark, "Thank you for setting us free." And he knew which story it was and how there would never be anything as real, because love is what makes things real, as this.
Thank you. That was great. They were both great.
Yes.
Oh man, I'm still weeping over the first one.
So yeah, and Amy said it really went well with the background, your background of the koi pond.
Your koi
Oh,
back.
good.
Yes.
Is that intentional?
Only in my unconscious.
Right.
So we'll take a break, about a 5-minute break.
Yeah, we'll take a little break. I'll mute everybody, and yeah, we'll be back in about 5 minutes with Nalo. So stick around. Okay. Just wait a minute for Nalo here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we are. Okay.
Amy, it's not true. You don't type too much.
Wait, what?
Amy says she types too much of these things. I know, but I miss the socializing.
No, it's good because then it's like that's our interaction without being able to hear the audience. It's good. That
Yeah,
we can,
no, it's great.
Yeah.
So welcome back to the second half of KGB. Some of our future readers are May 19th, Angela Slater. Actually, I think it's Slater. It's like I can never remember. It's spelled like Slater, but I think someone told me it's Slater. And Rebecca Roanhorse. June 16th, Nadja Bolton and Shauna McGuire. July 21st, we have Kim Stanley Robinson and Nancy Kress. August 18th, we have AC Wise and Karen Lord. And we'll see who we have after that. So our next reader is Nalo Hopkinson, who is a Jamaican-born Canadian author and maker of objects. She has won the World Fantasy Award, the Andre Norton Nebula Award, and the Sunburst Award for Canadian Literature, the Fantastic. She authored and co-authored the series House of Whispers for DC Comics, set in Neil Gaiman's Sandman universe. Zephyr recently honored her with the Grandmaster Award for Lifetime Achievement. Congratulations, Nalo, and welcome to the reading.
Thank you. So my story, I have one story for you. It's quite a different tone than Bruce's, which still both of which still have me all verklempt. It's a little short, so that gives me time to tell you a bit of the background. The story is called Covenant, and it was recently published in an anthology called Planet City by a man named Liam Young. He's a speculative architect, and there is a theory, an idea out there in the world that one of the ways that we could rewild the planet, like give it time and space to just recover itself from everything that humanity has done to it, is if the whole human race retreated into one large city and left the rest of the planet to itself. This is, the anthology is part of a multimedia project. There's a film that Liam has made. This is all going to be part of, I believe, a triennale in Australia. So he contacted me and asked me if I would write a story, a science fiction story for the project. He put together a team of a think tank of people. He put together different types of fiction writers, and everybody had come up with the ways in which this world would work, how it would, how its various cultures would work, how its infrastructure would work. And he asked me to write a science fiction story set in the world. My brain is a very contrary one. So the minute I said to it over a year ago, so you need to write a science fiction story, it said, do we though? Do we really? Does it have to be science fiction? And I kept trying various kinds of ways to go at the story and checking over the wonderful document that Liam sent to me. And the deadline was coming, and the deadline was coming, and the deadline was coming. And finally, this is Covenant is what came out. I have a Patreon profile. And one of the things I do very, very badly is write short shorts in which I tuckerize people who are part of my, who are my supporters. I have been quite lax at it, but I have done some of them. And the core for this story comes from one of those pieces of flash fiction I wrote. The protagonist's name is the name of the person who's a supporter of mine. And here we go, Covenant. Proverb. Your child wants to forget that it used to be the baby whose ass you used to wipe. Understand the city of Covenant wasn't always the city, wasn't always the place where all Earth's humans lived. For millennia before Covenant came to be, people had infested the whole of the earth, devouring her goodness and shitting out gratitude and poison into the air, the soil, and the water. But then Earth began to defend herself. She spit our poison back at us in the form of plagues and conflagrations, damned near killed us all. So we had to learn manners, you feel me? Had to learn to respect the lady, to stop chomping on her like a teething baby that still wants the titty. We had to let her have herself back, to heal. So we built the city of Covenant and retreated into it. We vowed to take nothing more from Mama Earth than we had already. We vowed to discard nothing more. We vowed ever after to break stuff we wasn't using down into its component parts and remake it into stuff we needed over and again, world without end. Thing is, we've been living here in Covenant so long that we kind of forget the way of it happening, so we make up stories about it. Nah, that ain't true. Of course we remember. Ain't we still designing and molding the modest magnificence that is the Ark of the Covenant? Don't we have history books and textbooks and more being written all the time? Don't we have scientists and teachers and artists and griots that carry our histories for us in one form or another and won't let us disremember them? We ain't forget shit. The real truth of it is, Human beings make up fancy stories to tell each other. It is the most particular thing about us as animals. This is the story as they told it once when I was visiting my suites in the Arrondissement 21,000 in the tall purple tower called Tampopo. Night times, after the sun's gone down and is no longer throwing sparkling traceries of sunshine through the hollow, mirrored webs that pierce all the towers in multiple places, bringing life-giving light down into the city's depths, folks who want to hang and jaw with other folks who'd rather be doing that than going to the movies or fucking or going dancing or who knows what all. I mean, they might do some of those things tomorrow or next week or in an hour or two. But for now, those folks want to go out onto the layered collars of balconies that ring Tampopo from top to bottom. They want to suck on a birra or a doob, watch their pickings climbing from level to level, and yell at them to take care. And they want to share stories, lobbing them from one balcony to another, each balcony continuing a piece of the tale. It's a bearing of witness, a sharing. And so what if they're bearing witness to something that's made the fuck up? Fact is, there's a deep truth in there, strong and curved as a spine. Here's what they shared that night. It began out in the world laid waste. It began with a potato. The eye of a potato, to be precise. This woman named Alilia, she had cut out the eyes of last night's potatoes for dinner with a sharp, sharp knife. She tossed the peel and the eyes into the garbage, because in those days, you tossed away shit you could use. It was legal, and folks even thought it was necessary. Don't get me started. But one eye had escaped Alilia. She found it on the kitchen table next morning, a little stubby, pale thing, lying there like a maggot, ready to dry up and die. She picked the potato eye up and was about to throw it away, same as she'd done with the rest. A single accusing bud stared up at her. On her kitchen table was an empty waxed paper cup. Her morning coffee had been in there when she got it from the shop on the way back from her morning walk. Yes, paper covered in wax to make it waterproof, and then they'd throw it away, feel me? Anyway, Alilia's steel cooking spoon held up when she used it to dig some soil out of the grass verge beside the sidewalk of her building. She had to do it that way. She wasn't allowed a garden where she lived, wasn't allowed a patch of soil. All the ground in her wee city was covered with paving or buildings or something called lawn grass that needed watering and watering but wasn't good for nothing, not to eat, not to improve the soil, not even really for pretty, to hear the old folks who were alive back then tell it. Them folks who lived out in the world was crazy. So yeah, our Alilia. She filled the cup with soil, buried the potato eye in it. The dryness of the soil against her fingers made her throat feel parched. Maybe the eye felt parched, she wondered. She didn't know shit about growing stuff, but she'd seen some things on TV. She ran some water from the kitchen tap into the cup. Then she put the cup onto the windowsill and forgot about it. Until the evening she came home from her job. That's a place they had to go most days back then to do stuff they didn't like all freaking day, and somebody paid them a little bit of money for it. Money's a whole nother crazy story. I'll tell you about that another time. And that Alilia, she looked into the cup on her kitchen windowsill and discovered an inch of eye stalk with 2 green leaves peeking out above the soil, complete with eye. She touched it with a gentle fingertip. The eye part of the stalk retreated, snail-like, into itself, then emerged again. The iris was yellow-green. It shimmered. The soil in the cup was nearly dried out. Alilia poured a little water into it. The eye watched her warily. She put the cup back onto the windowsill, then scurried to her fridge to see what else was in the crisper. In just a few weeks, she had a little parade of coffee cups on the windowsill, another potato eye, a kohlrabi top which was now growing 2 small paws, or maybe they were hands. A watermelon seed had sprouted a green lump which appeared to have 2 nipples. The root part of a green onion had yielded a snaky, scaled green tail which wagged slowly. 2 pink, fleshy frills came from a chunk of horseradish. They seemed to prefer being kept wet. The squash seeds never grew at all, but the pineapple crown was apparently turning into many small jaws with green, serrated baby teeth. When her indoor jungle seemed sturdy enough, Alilia transplanted them all into whatever she could find. Empty coffee cans, a bucket with a hole in the bottom, good for drainage, right? Rusted pots. She arranged them all along the outside wall of her ground floor apartment. The assemblage became the talk of her small apartment complex. In a few weeks, she knew more of her neighbors by name than she ever had before. Yep, people didn't talk to each other much back then unless they really wanted to. People had enough space to ignore each other. That part wasn't so bad. Any road. Philomene and Taisha in 212 suggested soft strips of t-shirt material for attaching the ever-lengthening eye stalks to the sticks Aaliyah had stuck into the containers to support the plants. Vayu in 302 and his two daughters, Stevie and Joan, helped her to keep the plants watered. One Sunday afternoon, the guy who lived in 111 wheeled over to where Aaliyah was gently cleaning the teeth in the pineapple jaws with a soft toothbrush. On his lap was a garbage bag full of coffee grounds. He said they'd make good mulch. He'd even dried them out in his oven for her. Just did it, but they're cool now, he said. So you see, them people back then weren't entirely stupid or wasteful. They were our ancestors, after all. Must have been some good in them, as there is in us. The guy's name was Eladon, and he wondered if Aaliyah might like to go see a movie with him someday. Aaliyah's heart thumped as they made it a date. She'd noticed his strong arms. Now she'd finally get to ask him what the tattoos on them were. No, Zeta, I don't know what they were. They can be whatever you want them to be. Folding chairs and picnic umbrellas began to appear in the courtyard, surprising as gills on a horseradish. All summer, the neighbors hung out there, chatting, sharing food and beer, watching their children romp like we're doing right now. The plants grew big enough to warp and burst their pots as the apartment complex waited to see what rough beast would assemble itself from Aaliyah's efforts. Nobody saw it happen. Just one morning, Aaliyah came out of her unit and found all the plants had vacated their containers. And what's more, they weren't plants no more. Instead, lying on the ground was a tiny green dragon, no bigger than a basset hound. No wings, it was a ladley worm. It just crawled where it wanted to go, but it didn't go anywhere much. It knew it had a good thing right where it was. It ate a lot and grew fast. What it liked to eat best was the stuff people in the apartment complex threw away. The tasty, yeasty vegetable peelings and bits of rotting prot, and by prot, I mean actual chopped up animals somebody had grown and killed for them, not the animal product we grow in vats nowadays. Them folks, they killed beings like themselves and ate them. I know, right? Bug, fuck, crazy and mean into the bargain. The dragon grew and began eating other discarded things. Old sprung sofas and torn clothes and broken down bookcases. It grew so big that it couldn't crawl anymore. It settled itself around the apartment complex. Folks had to clamber over it to get to their jobs, but they didn't mind because no other apartment complex had a cool pet dragon. When the dragon grew big enough, it started eating other crazy things that people out in the world plagued her with in those days, sidewalks and cars and lawn grass. It got so huge that it covered the apartment complex that had birthed it. Then it got so big that it covered the whole neighborhood and then the whole wee city. It shat out mounds of rich organic stuff. It shat out towers of it. And the people in the city hollowed out the towers and made homes in them. And they didn't have to go to their jobs no more because they had everything they needed right there. They could work at whatever they pleased and have time to hang with their friends and their pickings and their sweets. And that's how the City of Covenant began, so some say. What's more, they say that one day, if we honor our covenant with the earth and show her that we're grown enough to act grown, she'll send us another baby dragon to feed and care for as it grows and grows. Only this one will have wings. And one day it'll be big and strong enough, and it'll unfurl the green translucent glory of those wings. They'll be so huge, those wings, that they'll be able to sail on the wind of the sun's light. That dragon will sail us on its broad back and take us to find other beautiful worlds. Not to use up, mind, but to live in and cherish. Wire bend, story end. Thank you.
That's utterly Yes, I would like to have a dragon grow out of my plants.
Right? Yeah.
Sure.
Gills on a horseradish. Gills on a horseradish.
Yeah. So if people have questions, feel free to start typing them in, but we can start. Let's see. Bruce, do you prefer writing fantasy or science fiction, or do you care? Or horror? I mean, which is your favorite genre or subgenre, or do you have one?
I'm writing really short these days, and so it's like, it's not. If someone were to say, which would you rather write? You know, a 20,000 word fantasy or 20,000 word science fiction, might say fantasy or horror, one of the two. But now I just kind of do, because I'm working at really short lengths. Just, I mean, they may end up dark matter or some minus. I'll reach a point where the words are, the stories are so short they're sucking up the, the space around them.
You're asking publishers to send stories back to you instead, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Negative word count. Yeah.
So yeah, I started in science fiction. I read, at the age of the character in that second story, the seventh daughter, I was just reading science fiction voraciously, no fantasy, just really science fiction. So I grew up, it was interesting, I grew up on Heinlein and Cordwainer Smith and all of those people. And, I've lived now long enough that analog, astounding, no longer is receptive to ESP. It's like, how long have I been like right. John Campbell, right? John Campbell, that was one of his big things, psionics. And now it's, no, our readers don't like that. So it's like, whoa, these giant arcs.
Right.
And I had a story, in fact, again, it's, you just marvel. You live long enough that you can marvel at these circles and cycles of things. That my first short story ended up in Isaac Asimov and Martin Greenberg's best SF stories. And for the year, it was the year 1963. Well, according to Isaac Asimov, that was the last year of the golden age. And it was like, I have lived so long that my first story was the end of the golden age. Then I went through new wave. And wherever we are now. So I guess the bottom line is one writes what one needs to write. And so sometimes it's science fiction. I remember I probably didn't mention it to you, but I hate, I announced it to friends anyways years ago, I hate vampire fiction, then immediately went and wrote something.
Right.
For your sins.
People say, what are you sick of? And I'll say, well, at one point I thought I would never stand to read into the zombie story. And yet, then you read a fabulous zombie story.
No, because if fiction isn't about making it new, and that's what the unicorn. You can be disgusted with unicorns, but you can make them new and fall in love with them again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't think that answered the question, but anyway, a lot of words.
We have a question from Misty306. Which books have you enjoyed the most throughout quarantine? Any recommendations?
There's a thing that when I was at Clarion and the writers in residence, many of them said that they no longer read much fiction, but were reading mostly nonfiction. I thought that's not going to happen to me. But it has happened. It's really difficult for me to read fiction for pleasure now, partly because it's my job. Not only am I writing, I'm teaching creative writing. And then come quarantine, artists mobilized and people started doing all these projects that were about basically helping us get through COVID halfway sane. And so my the level of requests I was getting to do various things, writings, readings, whatever it is, teaching, felt like it has tripled. So I haven't done much reading for pleasure at all. However, recently I picked up, because I used to be able to read, not very deeply, but read a novel a day if I wanted to. And I want to have that back, that ability to just get lost in a story. And I picked up N.K. Jemisin's The City We Became. And it's 3 days on. I'm now 2/3 of the way through the dang thing and loving it. So that's one I would definitely recommend. I have also just received, so this is not so much a recommendation as a cool thing you might not know about, The Mermaid of the Black Conk by Monique Raffi, who is a Trinidadian writer. Let me show you the cover. She's an award-winning writer. I have read her nonfiction. I've read her fiction. Doesn't that look tasty? So that's going to be the next one.
Okay.
Bruce, what have you been reading? Anything?
Probably because of politics and the polarization. I grew up, it's a long story, but I grew up with a lifeboat mindset, which is we're all in it together. And well, that I don't know when that disappeared from the nation, but it seems to have. So I've actually read a lot of policy journals, scholarly, just those kind of calm, reasonable people, and with their context rather than little pieces. So that's therapy, I guess. So I read that in difficult times for some kind of order and therapy. I've actually gone back to people I liked decades ago. And it's funny because you might be young and like them, but I think you also are subtly picking up on the fact that they're good, even if you couldn't possibly analyze, right, why they're good. So some of the ones who've influenced me over time in science fiction, I wish I could go back and remove the 50s male stuff from Cordwainer Smith. But I mean, I just love his man, got 12 languages and he's just amazing. And it's just dated with though he does some interesting things, The Woman Who's a Man. And I mean, there's some interesting things there, but it's in that kind of creaky 50s way, but re-engaging him and just science fiction, or even old issues of Astounding and Galaxy. It's kind of like getting to see differently what I responded to back in the day. But Sherwood Anderson, a lot of just original short story writers, the ones that influenced American short fiction. And so that's it, I guess, revisiting, and it's rather remarkable what you can find out by going back and reading what you sometimes you find out you totally misunderstood the story.
Right. Or with time you realize that you're getting something completely different out of it.
The first novel how old am I? The first novel I loved was by Andre Norton called Starborn. And I have tried again and again to find in it the novel that I fell in love with. I was 14. What are the chances? I mean, it was like a code of wonder, right? Yeah. These wonderful things happen. Code. No, I can't, you pick it up and you read the first sentence. I know where this sentence is going. And I know, it's just like jaded. Shoot me, please. But yeah. And I remember in college, what a great novella Death in Venice is. No, I got it totally wrong. It's great, but not for the reason I thought. I interpreted the exact opposite of what. So that means that it's all a Rorschach test, right? It's all, and that's okay. We still write what we need to write, whatever the influence is, whatever the illusions are.
Yeah.
This question's close to my heart. You want to read it, Ellen?
Which one? One for Matt. And how do you go about stretching yourself creatively, getting outside your writerly comfort zone when you feel you're in a rut?
Oh, this is. Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. Okay. So either of you can take this.
Nalo,
this-
why don't you go for that one?
How do you get out of your, if you feel you're in a rut, do something you're terrified of doing. Do something you're terrified of doing. Put it out into the world that you want to write comics. And
How did you get into writing comics?
I put it out into the world that I wanted to write comics. And I was studying a little bit, trying my hand at a few things, and bending the ear of people who write comics and are comics artists and who publish comics. And then Vertigo, which used to be a publishing arm of DC, contacted me and said, we're going to be publishing 4 new Sandman books. Would you like to pitch us for one? And I said, duh. So I pitched. It is the worst pitch I have ever written, and I've written some bad ones. I will never read that pitch again. But that's how I got into doing it. But the question about when you feel you're in a rut, sometimes it means literally doing something different, like moving from, if you're writing on a keyboard, to writing on paper, moving from, getting up from that piece of thing you're trying to write and going and cooking a meal or making a doll or having a walk. There's nothing like doing something physical that you don't have to think much about for freeing up the creative brain.
Yeah.
For me, that's going for a walk, doing the dishes. When I'm stuck, a lot of dishes get done. When I'm not, do not go into the kitchen. And yeah, keep throwing yourself into that place that is scary. And you know what it is because your brain keeps trying to skitter you around it. Go right into it and see what happens. Risk having to be a learner again.
Bruce, do you have a technique for overcoming ruts?
Well, it's again, when you've written as many centuries as I have, that's again how it feels. What happens, and I didn't predict that it would happen. I have a lot of writer's blocks. Well, they're not, and also I'm a writing coach, so I'm supposed to know how to solve them. The writer's blocks are interesting. They're often about method. In other words, how I approach the material. They're not about what you might think. So I think it's kind of like that narrowing path of right action thing where it gets narrower and narrower and you better not step off the path. So sometimes it's a matter, well, I can't write this story. I should be able to write this story. And then it'll be, oh, I'm approaching it in absolutely the wrong way. And once I do it, it unblocks. So in one sense, and also it's a matter of making things new again. The question was about tropes and probably cliches, and I'm a firm believer in the blue unicorn exercise, which is if you hate mafia hitmen, make them short Irish guys who hate opera but have to pretend they like it. Or take away the horn, turn the unicorn blue. It's mad about the horn, and it cavorts with whores rather than virgins in the moonlight.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, I mean,
I think can be made new again, and it's important. Okay, get on the soapbox here, professorial soapbox. It's a cliche is just a badly executed universal, or we wouldn't keep having them. All you have to do is find a fresh way of articulating the universal. And if you throw away the universals with the cliches, you end up in trouble over time. Anyway, that I really believe that. So yes, blue unicorns. That's basically how I do it. I see a couple of things here that are not coming in as comments, but are over in the comments. I mean,
the comments window.
Well, yeah, there's a comment window, but I wanted to say, Bruce, I followed your career. I only started publishing you when I was in Omni, I think in the early 80s or so, maybe the mid 80s. But you had a whole career before that. You published really young. I mean, your first novel, Beyond Humanity, was it, or something?
Well, it was actually that first short story, and I view it as the muse, male or female, it doesn't matter, having tricked me, because then it took another 20 stories before I sold my second story. But that first story ended up Yeah, I was 16, reading voraciously. I mean, I would walk to class and read a short ace double,
Right.
one of those novels. I was living and breathing. It was more real, and I'm sure many of the people listening
You were
more real, especially at that age, more real than the rest of the reality. And so I wrote this story, and it ended up being reprinted in Judith Merrill's Year's Best. And yeah, it was a long time ago.
And then you started writing differently I see you writing in different stages.
Yes, you're right.
Different things. I mean, I read Dream Baby, which is Vietnam, an excellent novel. I think it was based on a novella, but I don't know. But
yeah, it was.
Or a short story. And then you didn't write for a few years, or at least I didn't see things. And then you started sending me a whole different set of stories for Omni that were about
exactly.
Animals and genetic engineering, and a whole bunch of wonderful stories that the girl who loved animals, and all these heartbreaking stories that was science fiction about humanity's basically.
Well, the stories for you at Omni that run, and the stories in other places around that time, but mainly the Omni stories were definitely a phase. I mean, not a phase, but I mean a period. And people will say, why don't you go and write like that again? And it's like, I can't do it.
You started something completely different. And like every 20 years or so, you write something different. And sometimes I like them. A bunch of saying, I don't like those at all. And then you start writing something else. I do. It's just very peculiar seeing
it. Let me put it simply, I am determined to be the last man standing. So no, it is, you can't go back. It's just crazy. You can't go back. It says something about what fiction really is. I mean, it may come out on the page, but it's where you are in life. And man, it'd be nice if it got a little bit longer, the pieces. So I'm working on the length, as you know. But yeah, years ago, Ellen posted something and said, McAllister's a decent writer, but God, I'm being modest. But he goes through these bursts where he just writes for a while and then he doesn't write. Total silence. Well, the long one, as you know, thanks to the experiments of a local doctor, cost me about 10 years. And so I never thought, especially under that medication, I never imagined I'd write again. And then 2003, a paragraph. 2 paragraphs. And finally, it was 10 years later, it was in fact The Seventh Daughter was the first story after. So if you're going to write, you're going to write. And writing has been important to me. It keeps the world something, relationship with the universe, meaning, order, something. So in other words, it keeps me going insane. Yeah, no, it keeps me going insane. But then the question is, why do I go insane if I don't write?
Right.
Okay, enough of that.
I have a similar period where I couldn't write and was afraid I was not going to be able to. It was partly health stuff and partly financial stuff. And now I find, I have ADD, I lose things all the time, but I find notebooks scattered about the apartment and there will be a paragraph in it that could only be mine. So somewhere in there, the brain is still doing the thing.
It's still, yeah, health's not a good thing because health also often involves medication, yada. Medication is kind of not who we are.
Yeah. This is a question that's close to my heart. It's from Amy Goldschlager. She asked Nalo, you seem very in tune with growing things in your work. What kinds of plants do you grow?
Well, here's the funny thing. If you read my work to try and figure out what I do and what I like, you will often be misled. But it's not a bad question. I used to say that I couldn't bear growing plants because they just sit there and die, whereas a pet will tell you when you've not changed the litter box in 3 weeks. But partly because of those couple of years of extreme financial duress, I started growing stuff when I could. Literally, if you take what Adelaide is doing, if you take the bottom off the leek and put that bottom in some water, you have more leeks, and you don't have to spend another $4.99 for them. I have not been able to do that much here. We live in an apartment with no balcony, first floor. The place where I would be growing things in pots is where they spray for insects. So what you're seeing is the frustration of not being able to grow stuff and the plans I have for growing stuff. I'm not really a gardener, but I do like pretty plants that you can eat. So squash it's a gorgeous plant, and then you get squash blossoms, and then you get squash. It's wonderful.
We have a question from Linda Addison for Bruce. Linda wants to know, Bruce, do you write the first draft of a story and then layer in the deeply touching, emotional, psychological of your stories? My heart is still aching with the two you read.
Oh, thank you, Linda. That's a very perceptive question. I do a lot of layering. I mean, I kind of write a template and then I go back, and it's the old gun, if you're going to shoot the gun at the end of the story, it better be there at the beginning, that kind of prepping, layering, but shaping. And so not just epiphanic moments, but just layering in. And I view it as kind of a musical composition that has color. In other words, well, you can start with purple, but if suddenly in the middle of the story you turn it red, and the ending involves red, maybe you need to do a little prepping, color, purple and red and purple and red. So it's a matter of shape and all that. But layering is very important to me. And I do lots. I'm a very visual writer, which means, unlike I've got a close friend who, actually a couple of them, who hear the damn stuff. They hear their novels. Oh, please. And they come out, no punctuation. They have to be punctuated. But they're publishable novels. Come on, and anyway, I hate that. I hate them. So I'm visual, so I have to see it in order to know it has to mirror back to me what I know to be good. And wouldn't it be nice if it came out already layered and nice? But it doesn't. So, I remember the first time I felt bad about myself, and that was hearing that I think Gibson, his short stories would be two drafts, then they'd be published. And it was, I can kill myself, I can kill him, or I can keep writing and not be competitive. So thank you, Linda. Glad you like the stories.
Nalo, how did you start writing? Have you been writing since you were a kid, or did you start later?
I'm getting to a point where I start to forget the answers to those questions. So my dad was a writer. He was a poet, playwright, actor. My mother is a library technician. She's the person who puts the cutter numbers on the spines of books. There were a house full of books of all kinds, everything from Caribbean folklore to Gulliver's Travels. So I read, that's what I did. I didn't write. In my teen years, I was 16, I was living in Guyana, living with my aunt, and a friend of hers realized I liked science fiction. And those were not books you could find in Guyana at the time. Not Ghana, Guyana, in a Caribbean country, at the tip of South America. And he was a big science fiction reader and brought some of his books over to lend me. And one of them was a compilation of stories from a Clarion workshop. And that was when it occurred to me that you could learn how to write the stuff that I loved reading. It hadn't occurred to me that anybody could show you how. And I sort of tucked that away and kept reading, science fiction, fantasy voraciously, till I moved to Canada and had a chance to attend the Clarion workshop. And that was when I was, I believe, in my early 30s. A couple of years before that, Judy Merrill was living in Toronto, and she had offered a science fiction writing workshop through a local college. But in order to get in, she wanted to evaluate the quality of your writing, so you had to submit a story, and I had not written anything. So I sat down and wrote 6 pages of a thing, freaked out because I had no idea what to do, where to take it. I just got stuck, handed it in as it was. Got into the workshop, which didn't get enough people to run. But Judy sat the 6 of us down who'd gotten into it and showed us how to be a critique group. And that's how I started writing. And that first 6 pages, I think, eventually became the beginning of my first novel.
We have a question here from Linda. Nalo, did the story you read come with the wonderful voice of the main character from the beginning?
Pretty close. I know that I was thinking of you as I was reading it, because I know you will have picked up on some of the vernacular notes I was putting in there. They're from various different places, but I have to start with the voice, or I don't have anything. So yes, the voice was very, very close to what it is now, and I didn't even know if they would take the story, because I thought they wanted science fiction. This is a fable. I've got solar winds in the end. But luckily, the editor, Mr. Young, was quite cool with that. So yeah, voice is really, really important to me. I have to be able to get the attitude of the character and the way they speak, and then the story will start to flow better.
Bruce, do you find any similarities between writing poetry and short fiction?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, actually I do. I think that's one of the reasons it is possible, I hope it's not true, that I've become, I think it started a couple of decades ago, a little impatient, or maybe I don't believe it as much, the plotting of things. What I believe in, unfortunately, is epiphany, those moments of realization, of transcendence. Well, that's fine for poetry, right? What's a poetic moment? But that's going to make your fiction real short, which is, of course, exactly where I am. So, yeah, there is. Certainly, it makes you, sometimes good, curse or blessing, can make you more of a stylist, meaning paying a tremendous amount of attention to style because poetry is about making language new and about the conflation of time and space, through language, all these things that not real, more Einsteinian than narrative, time, space, illusion, fiction tends to be. So yeah, epiphany is important to me. I don't mean in a religious sense, but the transcendental moment, the moment of realization, poetic moments. Yeah, very definitely.
Now, how did you adjust to writing comics after writing prose? I mean, how did you do it?
She's laughing.
How did you know what to do?
Well, the first attempt at a comic I showed to Mark Asquith, who was at that point the executive producer of Canada's science fiction station. Dear friend of mine, a wonderful guy, and he said too many words.
Yeah.
He said too many words.
Did you write it to the art? I mean, did you have art first? I mean, I'm not even sure how comics work. Did you illustrate it to the text, or is it?
It depends on whether you're writing something in a licensed world. So if it's DC or Marvel, it's writer driven, and then it goes to the artists. Okay. Usually, if it's something indie where you're doing the art and the writing, you choose. If it's something that's a project for one of the smaller publishers like Abrams or Fantagraphics, again, you choose, but it tends to be writer driven. And I'm teaching 2 creative writing classes now, one grad, one undergrad, in the graphic novel. And my students are beginning to practice writing scripts, and many of them are prose people. So the idea that script is a set of, you're communicating your vision to the artists. It's not just about, they tend to be very sort of plot, and what people are thinking. And I'm like, yes, but what do you want the artist to take from this? What are they going to produce based on your words? And it is a big switch The first 2 comics I did for Vertigo, I had to rewrite 8 times each before the editors were like, okay, we can work with this. Because I was putting things in the panel descriptions that would have gone into the words that would be on the comic and vice versa. And then a switch happened. I began to get the hang of it, but writing a monthly comic is brutal. And fibromyalgia, ADHD, nonverbal learning disorder, full-time teaching gig. And the editors said, would you like a co-writer for a while? I said, yes, please. And they got Dan Waters co-writing with me, and that was an apprenticeship in itself. Dan has so much more experience, is so generous and professional, is so much an artist and a stylist in his writing, and is so very, very good at collaborating. Like, he knew how to let me take the lead, but also how to sort of say, well, this might work better. So I had an apprenticeship with Dan Waters and 4 editors, and occasionally Neil, is how I began to get the hang of it. I did fairly quickly get the hang of it, but it was pretty brutal.
Carol has a question. Has coaching and teaching new writers affected your own writing any way? I think you both coach and teach, right? So we'll start with Bruce.
I keep asking myself that question. I have for some years now. I don't think directly it has, because actually what the coaching that I do is, and it's primarily fiction, but it's actually all sorts of genre informed. It's really a matter of bringing to consciousness the craft, the techniques, if that makes any sense, meaning that's the main role. Lots of writers write very incredibly well, much better than I do. But they don't necessarily, it would be hard for them to teach because they haven't brought to consciousness what they do. And it applies to any, art form, and probably tennis and everything else. Has it made me, let's say, focus more on language in my own writing? I don't think it has. No. But I keep asking the question. So thank you for the question.
Nalo?
I think it has me in some good ways and some not so good ways. The good ways far outweigh the not so good. And one of the not so good is that when I started teaching, I moved to the US to start teaching university. I had not done it before, and discovered just how much my students struggle to write a functioning sentence, and how little they know about how to do it. And it breaks my heart, because I could see the creativity just coming off of them. And the words they're very, very poor at handling meaning in a sentence. So now things I never used to be able to do, like confuse there and there, like spell them wrong, I couldn't before this. Now I do it all the time because I'm reading it all the time. On the other hand, sometimes I'll find myself going over a text by someone, and there's a thing they're doing, and I've seen it the week before and the week before and the week before, and they're not getting it. I don't understand why it's getting me so exercised, and then I realize it's because of something I do. So it's it's an exercise in humility. And then, bless their hearts, they will ask you questions about how things work, and you think, I have no freaking clue. So it does mean that I have to bring to consciousness what this process is. The stressing thing is that half the time I think I'm lying, because it's kind of innate, and I don't have an explanation for it that feels like it gets at the kernel of what they're asking me. But every so often I hit a moment where I say something and I see a light go on in someone's eyes, and they start scrabbling for the keyboard or the notebook I love those moments where I half the time I don't know what it is I've done. I'm not even sure what it is I've said, but I've helped them find something that they didn't know they had. Yeah. So gorgeous.
it's the old question of whether writing can be taught or not, and that's a glib question, and it's usually been answered in a glib way. And what I think you're saying is it's surprising what can be. I mean, how you can connect and there'll be, but that doesn't mean you have any control over it. It's not something you're going to put in the textbook or Writer's Digest book. That's the terrible thing. A tremendous amount, I think, can be. And I taught in university for 23 years, and since then, so now a little over 20, I've been doing just writing coaching. So it's one-on-one. It's very, very different. And they're choosing to come to me. They tend to be older, right? They've got projects. And it's interesting. Some are, congenitally unable. I know it sounds terrible. Just hear me out. Congenitally unable to write certain kinds of things. Like we all are. And at the same time, if they are moved gently over to what's truer to them, it's amazing what they can write. And I learned that actually at a inner city community college. And I was told by the chair, a very smart guy, he said, don't do the level below college, because they're all angry that they're not in the college level. Go one below that and work with short text, and you will be stunned by how smart and creative and eloquent they are. Maybe just orally, but amazing. So one of the wonderful things about coaching and teaching is discovering that if someone is writing, and I know it sounds glib, writing true to themselves, even mechanics, everything fixes. Well, you don't want to be in an English department and say, if people are writing creatively, true to themselves, their grammar and composition will all improve. What? Well, that means you don't have to teach those courses. That's not to tell people. So it's kind of one of the reasons I no longer, it was like, no, I just want to work one-on-one. I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I had a story from a young man who's an undergrad, and the story was really strong and clearly something that he felt, experienced. Yeah. He could not, I think he treated commas like they came in a salt shaker. That's very grammar all over the place. But he asked to work with me one-on-one, and wrote, it was memoir actually, and by the end of it, he'd found his own style, so the lack of commas was actually working for him. It wasn't that he learned how to use commas, he learned how to not let them get in his way.
That's exactly right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, well.
So both of you, have multiple creative endeavors. Like Nalo, you said, you work in comics and fiction, and Bruce, you do fiction and poetry. Are there other creative endeavors that you have besides those?
Nalo, you.
Yeah.
I have your fabric. You do fabric.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to stand up again. And yes, I am.
You do wonderful mermaids, too.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll wait for her, but
Show and tell.
Here it comes. Here we go.
I don't know if she'll even fit in the frame.
Hey.
And this thing is backwards. So
I know everything's
the
backwards.
hell out of me.
Oh, she's
she's almost 3 feet.
Wow. Is that a gourd? Is that a gourd?
No, it's fabric. It's fabric in a chicken wire frame.
Wow. The front part for a second, it looked like a gourd.
Yeah. It's all fabric that's been stuffed to bursting and then painted and sanded and painted and sanded. So I've started making sculptures, really. And yeah, there's lots of African mermaids in my stuff. But this one draws on I think it's Sumerian, the snake goddess images that you see a lot. And it ties in with a lot of their connections, echoes in some West African snake woman imagery. So I just sort of married the two because I wanted to and I could.
And what do you do? What else do you do, Bruce?
Oh, I love film and TV. I will watch almost anything. Not Married with Children, but I'll watch a creature feature, and I just love it. I always have. So right before COVID, we'll get into details. It looked like Dream Baby, but a really morphed version of Dream Baby was going to be set up. Gigantic project. They were attaching talent, writers, actors. I mean, it looked like it was going to go. And I love that kind of writing. It's because it's a, it's called treatments. It's called, it's pitching and how to bring to life in an expositional way. I mean, it's like an exciting, energetic, expositional way of writing because you're having to summarize things. And I really enjoyed it. And I think that threw me off because then it was like, I'm not continuing. Oh no, what's happening? So I needed to get back to fiction. But I also grew up in art. So I do some art painting occasionally. And
you're collecting your archaeological stuff.
Well, this is, yes. I grew up in a science family. My dad was kind of a marine electrical engineer, classified work, microwave communicate, Cold War. He was Annapolis. And our mother was an underdog championing cultural anthropologist. We're not quite sure because the DNA test, there isn't a large enough pool to find out. But if you look at photographs of her dad, I mean, it's either Chickasaw or Cherokee. And so the social sciences and the natural sciences. So I grew up with early man, archaeology, and paleontology and marine. And that's what makes me happy, is going out in nature. And you could tell that from that one story. But happier with nature than I am with people and their relationship to nature. And my office here, if you could see it, the bookcases, there are bookcases, but half the bookcases are also filled with rocks and fossils.
He's giving me some rocks and fossils.
Yeah.
Ellen
Ellen is very kind. I mean, okay, Bruce, you have another rock for me.
Thanks,
hey, what is this?
Rocks are amazing.
Aren't they?
stuff. I don't know what it is, but I have it here.
What's interested me recently over the past maybe 10 years is fossil ghosts.
I don't know what this is. I can't remember. But, sorry. Again, it's
the other way, yeah.
Is that? Did I give that to you?
Yes, you gave me all of these.
Oh, yes. Those are
Shards of
those are Neolithic, I think, from North.
the wrong direction.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the actually
I love
Cro-Magnon from.
the idea that I'm holding something.
So it's early man. Yeah, it's like you
holding
should
something
be
that's old.
third person to touch these. Speaking of ghosts,
So what are we talking
20 to 30. These are artifacts.
How
This
long ago?
is flint from southern France, and so that outside the cave.
To me, it's
But-
the idea I'm holding something so
The
ancient.
tools, yeah.
How old?
I freaked her out by making her an earring from a labrum decoration from North Africa, Neolithic, so 5,000 to 8,000 years old. I am now wearing. I'm wearing.
Yeah.
But
So
fossil
you
ghosts
said
are
fossil
ghosts
ghosts.
are wonderful. Oh, so try to imagine you go in the canyon here. You can go and find just endless seashells, coral, marine invertebrates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but what if they've been put under pressure and heat? So there are so many seashells in the formations here that you can track them. You can see where the oysters start to bleed and become ghosts in the rock, in the metamorphic rock.
Wow.
It's just amazing. Guess what? There's no field. There is no scientific
There's
field.
no field.
Why? Geologists, it's metamorphic rock. What are you talking about? Who gives a damn? And the taxonomist, paleontologist, you can't tell what species it is. I'm not interested. And of course, how could a science fiction writer not be interested in it? Or a Gaian fantasy, right? I mean, how could you not be interested in that? Where you look, you hold up the rock and you go, oh my God, that is oyster shell that is now smeared like a ghost through it. It has started to bleed and to ooze and all of that.
Well, the idea of these spans of time, it blows my mind. My wife and I were on a trip in Switzerland. We were hiking up a mountain. I don't know how high we were. We were like, I don't know, 8,000 feet above sea level. And there were fossilized shells in the rock. There's no water anywhere. There's no ocean anywhere.
It's like the Antarctic
above sea level. Yeah. So, like, how many millions of years had to pass for this to come up to that height?
I had decades ago this fantasy, and I'd tell it to people. I would say, if you want a good college, all of your faculty, just make them fantasy and science fiction writers. Why? Well, we all know why. Right? We're fascinated by this stuff. We're lay experts on all of this stuff, and also we're, full of life, and to hell with conventional scholarship. So
we'll tell you a story about it. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. I found I was when I was a teenager out with my church group, and we were somewhere in the country in Jamaica on a mountain somewhere, and I ran away from the churchy people with my best friend, and he found a fossilized shell that was, the inside was full of crystal.
Yes.
But it was, water had not been there for a very, very long time, but there was this shell. So magical.
Well, what's fascinating about that is if it has crystal in it, that means that it was an air pocket. It's just like a geode. And it was under sediment, and sediment never got inside it. And over millions of years, the water carried the silica into it and made the crystals. There's your your time, the incredible time it takes. They still don't understand fossilization. Well, why would you? It takes millions of years, you guys.
Yeah, it is. It's a geode. It's a shell that became a geode.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Are there more questions about any?
Any more questions?
By the way, if you notice me looking to the side, it's because my cats have been chasing each other for the last 10 minutes.
I see. There's one from Carol here. She says, "I have mermaid envy." I love your mermaid, so of course that pains me to read a story in your direction.
That hurt, but it hurt in a good way. Your story.
Wonderful comments from everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't see any more questions coming in. Do either of you have any questions for each other?
Or for anyone?
For anyone, yeah.
Oh, here's a question for Bruce.
Okay. Oh, yes.
We missed,
Spanish 108. I think I missed this before. Bruce, how do you approach writing a prologue? How is it different from writing a first chapter?
I think there are so many kinds of prologue, it's hard to answer. The short story I read happens to be the little novel. Okay, that little novel, The Village Sang to the Sea, is about, it's got two realities. One is the stories this boy writes over his life.
What are you doing, Jen?
And the other is the life he lives. All right, so the life he lives in the other. So there are two real, the seventh daughter is actually the prologue that is a story he has written. If that makes any sense. Well, that's pretty arcane. That's pretty strange. A lot of prologues are omniscient, or if you're writing a certain kind of genre fiction, expendable characters. Think of your teen monster movie. You've got to have the teenage couple making out so that the beast can get them in the prologue, basically. So they're different. They're different kinds. I know agents hate them because they're not representative, right?
I'm not wild about them.
What?
I'm not wild about them. But I read a novel in the last few years, and I don't remember even what kind of novel. It might have been a crime novel. It might have been horror. I have no idea. But the prologue told the whole story.
God.
No, seriously. And it's like,
Where was the editor? You know?
where is the agent? Where was the editor? Why did you do that? Why would you do that? I don't understand. I mean, it's not like I don't get it.
Often they are really extraneous. I mean, a lot of the newbie writers, young writers I work with, they'll have a prologue, and it's why it's got to have a function. If it doesn't have a function, we want an intimate point of view experience with your main character. Please give it to us.
Same thing with dreams. Unless a dream does something, unless it enhances, it explains a character or psychologically does something.
Yeah.
It's worthless. I mean, like what? It's just waste of space, I think. I mean, but there are uses for dreams.
Well, it's because dreams are subordinate. In other words, yeah, it's a dream, but I'm interested in what's really happening. So please,
unless the dream has something to do with what's really happening. Yeah. Otherwise, forget it. I would argue with Lucius. Lucius once had a long dream sequence in a story, and I made him cut the whole thing. He probably put it. It was a novella, I'm sure, and probably when he did it, had it collected or something. He probably put the dream back in. But I said, "Why do you have a 2-page dream?"
Well, I view it as competitive. It's competing. It's competitive. So it better have a good reason. Right. Otherwise, where it's like, all right, and the story needs to continue. Please, why are we in this subordinate reality?
And why are we stopping this story dead here for like 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Bad dreams are bad.
A lot of prologues.
Take one thing.
For the beginning writers that I'm working with, they've thought long and hard about this world and the background and everything, and they're going to tell you all of it to you because so you can understand. Like, we don't care until we know your characters and have a reason to be absorbed by them.
That's right.
Take that stuff, sprinkle it throughout.
I think that's one of the hardest
take it out.
things. Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things to learn as a new writer is what not to put in, right? Because especially like a spec fic author, you have like these, like you said, these fantastical worlds that you've dreamt up, and you want to put it all on the page, but you can't do that. You can't.
Well, but you need enough so that the reader can comprehend exactly. You need to clarify things though sometimes.
Sure.
There have been
get in and get out. Like 2 words.
I mean, William Gibson's first submission to me was with Johnny Mnemonic, and the thing is though, at the time it was so compressed it was hard to understand what was going on, and I got him to decompress it. Now 40 years later,
of course, now you like to
we don't know. We all wish we had the original. I wish we had the original script so I could see what he actually did. We would understand it now the way it was.
Yeah,
and it's really unfortunate because maybe
things have sped up very definitely, certainly over 50 years, but I think they've sped up anyway. Become more linear and all that. In coaching, I it's what you over time come up with. It's like your best lines, the ones that are most helpful to those you're trying to help. And one of them is a lot of writers separate character from plot. So then they end up, pushing their character around. There's no character or plot. And the idea is that the plot's character placed under escalating pressure, and that invites the two to marry. But a lot of things, where it's, I've got description. Isn't that separate? No, it's not. Plot. No, it's not separate.
I read visually and I want to see what's going on, and I want to be able to place a character in a situation and in the setting enough so that I understand I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. Where is that taking place? What happened to that? It's like, I can't picture it. And I don't know if I assume everyone does not read that way. I mean, I have to assume that, right? Do you guys all read that way or not?
No, most people need an orientation, don't they? They need to be oriented.
Right, but I think it's more than that. I think.
Yes, but you don't. What you were talking about, Matt, was the
orientation matters. Yes.
All the stuff that's in your head. Fiction is not film. You can't possibly on a given scene give all the information.
No,
we don't even
enough of it. And
at the same time, physical orientation is important, especially the more fantastic the story.
Yeah. And I've seen the reverse situation where it's called like the white room syndrome, right? So you you're like, where are they? What like, what places? I have no idea where this takes place. I have no idea where.
But fiction is all about, as far as I can tell, it's paradoxical. So we're talking about the difference between effective confusion and ineffective confusion, right?
And intentional too. Not only
Well, that's true.
Is this intentional or not?
Yeah.
If it's intentional, that's okay, as long as you don't do it all the time.
As long as it's working. I mean, it can be intentional, but be an intentional power.
I hate experimental fiction unless I don't notice it.
Yes,
that's wonderful.
that's great. Yeah, because
I've read things. I've read books, and I didn't realize till after the fact. Oh my God, that was that was present tense or whatever, or there was dialogue, punctuation, not anymore, quotation marks. But but if it jumps out at me, it drives me nuts.
Well, because
you're trying to be experimental. It's like,
the mechanics of it, the author's
I
hand.
love that, but some people really love that kind of writing.
And I've got a whole couple of generations of students who imprinted on Star Wars and that logo at the beginning. You don't need to do that. You could have skipped all of that and got right into the movie. We would have been just as happy.
It would have been fine. Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming up on almost 9 o'clock. So unless there's anything else, I think we're going to wrap up. So we've been talking with Nalo Hopkinson and Bruce McAllister. Here's their books.
The plug.
Yeah, one of their many creative works. Links are down below in the YouTube description to purchase their stuff, their bios. Check out their work. Very, very talented people. Super happy to have you both here tonight. This was great, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in live and not live on YouTube. We've as we said earlier, we've reached a literal global audience, and it's really amazing, and we're super excited about that. So thank you guys for being part of that. Yes. Thank you to everyone who donated, etc. We'll see you all next month. So everyone take care. So Nalo and Bruce, just hang on. We're gonna hang out in the green room, but I'm gonna end the live broadcast. So all right, everybody, have a good night.
Thank you all for your comments.
Wonderful
comments.
Thanks everybody. All right, good night.